France, where the finance minister has been speaking about spending cuts and budget deficits.
Yeah, this is the biggest challenge facing the new French government under Manuel Valls, cutting 50 billion euros from public spending and bringing the budget deficit down below this 3% limit by next year. Now, on Wednesday, Manuel Valls announced that most social welfare payments, pensions will be frozen until October of next year. He also extended a freeze on public sector pay until 2017. Now, the government has said that it will meet its EU target of bringing the budget deficit below 3% by next year. But speaking on French radio this morning, the Finance Minister Michel Sapin said that France had gotten permission from its European partners to slow down the pace of the cuts necessary. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The timetable has been modified. We discussed it with our European partners so that everybody understands. We will be reducing our deficit slightly, slower than planned, but we will, of course, respect all our commitments.
Well, next to Google, which has somewhat disappointed investors with its latest results.
Yeah, further proving that the more successful you are, the more difficult it is to please people. Profits and revenues did rise at Google over the first 3 months of this year, but investors took fright over a fall in how much money Google was earning for its advertisements. Shares on the internet giant fell some 3% in after-hours trading, wiping billions off the value of the company. Catherine Clifford has the story.
After the closing bell, disappointment from Google. Revenues were up $15.4 billion and profits rose 3%. But investors had expected more. Cost per click fell by 9%. It's Google's most basic way of making money each time a user clicks on an advertised link. More and more people are using smart devices to browse content, and advertisers generally pay less for a small screen platform than for a larger desktop one. However, it's a small blip necessary before a bigger leap, according to their chief business officer. He said that in mobile you have location and you have context of individuals, which you don't have with the desktop. And the more you know about the user in the context, the more effective advertising you can provide them. Google's been branching out into physical products, for example with its Google Glass smart spectacles. It's recently invested $3.2 billion in home technology maker Nest Labs, and it's snapped up drone manufacturer Titan Aerospace. Taking on new ventures whilst backing out of failed ones, Google's selling Motorola for almost $10 billion less than it bought it for. Despite these ventures, advertising remains the real driving force behind profits, so investors hope to see cost per click get quickly back on its feet.
Now, that news from Google having somewhat of an effect, feeding into this, in fact, effort we've seen in the technology sector recently when we've seen shares falling in recent months. We had seen telecoms and technology shares on the Nikkei in Tokyo down, but the main index managed to close flat at the end of the day. Fairly uninspiring moves across the rest of the Asian markets. Here in Europe, it's a pretty flat open to the day as well. The drinks giant Diageo's shares in London are down some 4% after the company reported falls in their sales in Asia. That's affecting their results. Here in Paris, the French oil company Total has announced that it's discovered oil off the Ivory Coast. No details yet on how big that find is. Investors only very slightly optimistic those shares in positive territory, but not by much.
Right, well, Stephen, give us some news on China's rival to Twitter.
Yes, Weibo has raised $285 million in its stock market debut in New York. The microblogging service priced its shares at $17 a piece, which is at the lower end of expectations, perhaps in response to those jitters in the technology sector. It sold almost 17 million shares, valuing the business at $3.8 billion. The British luxury group Mulberry says it's to cut its prices after issuing its fourth profit warning in 2 years. The company had built its business on affordable luxury goods, but raised prices recently to attract high-end consumers. Mulberry now expects profits of around $23 million this year, just over half of what it earned in 2013. And the maker of Rémy Martin brandy has issued a profit warning after its sales plummeted in China. Rémy Cointreau says the figures are down by almost a third in the last 3 months and by 20% over the whole year. The company now expects its earnings to be 1/5 less than expected for this year. Shares in the firm down over 4% in Paris this morning.
Well, finally, Stephen, one of the biggest mobile games is making its way to China.
I don't know if you're a Candy Crush addict, Rochelle, if you managed to...
Haven't tried yet.
You haven't tried it yet. Well, there are a lot of people who do love it. It was one of the most downloaded apps last year, and it's going to be making its way to China now, thanks to the Chinese tech giant Tencent, which is bringing the game to its 225 million users of its social networks. It's a big money spinner for the company King Digital. They floated on the New York Stock Exchange back in March. It wasn't a very good flotation, though. Their shares down some 16%, and they'll be hoping to make money out of this move to China.
All right, Stephen, thanks very much for our business update this morning. Let's take a look now at what's grabbing the headlines around the world. First of all, a lot of papers are reacting to the ferry accident in South Korea, aren't they, Flo?
That's